Welcome to the Deer Wizard Podcast, conversation shaping the deer industry. I'm your host, Josh Newton, the Deer Wizard. Through interviews, advocacy, and industry news, we deliver field-proven insights to help producers build better herds. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Deer Wizard Podcast. We have some exciting news. So we are starting a EHD, or epizootic hemorrhagic disease, series. And I thought no better person to lead that discussion off than Dr. Samantha Wisley from the Sherry Lab at the University of Florida. Dr. Wisley is a PhD. She runs the Sherry Lab, and it's a dedicated program that's been in place for, more than a decade now, or around a decade, something like that, that specializes in EHD research, amongst other things, but it really cut its teeth on that. And so we're so excited. She's agreed to come on the show, and we have a great discussion. We kind of go through the basics and overview of what the Sherry Lab is, her role there, some of the people there. And we're going to be doing regular shows with her on about a quarterly basis. So we'll get regular updates from one of the longest standing EHD labs in the country. I hope you enjoy the conversation. I certainly did. EHD is not my specialty area as far as animal health goes. So it's really interesting to get someone that's got all the background and scientific data and research to talk about it. I do apologize. Some of the audio quality is a little less than great, to put it lightly. But I wanted to make sure that we put this show out for you guys. So I hope you enjoy. And without further delay, join us and our conversation with Dr. Samantha Wisley. Dr. Wisley, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Josh. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you here. We were chatting offline a little bit, and of course, we got to see each other just recently at the North American Deer Farmers Conference, which was great. And I wanted to. I think your whole program and initiative of what you guys have been doing at the Cherry Lab in Florida is pretty amazing. And so I want to talk about that story with you. Why don't you give the audience just a little bit of background on yourself, and we'll work up to present day.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a professor at the University of Florida in the Department of Wildlife Ecology and Conservation. And then I'm also the director of the Cervidae Health Research Initiative. My background is as a molecular ecologist, and field biologist. So I combined going to the field and studying the ecology of animals with the diseases that they may or may not carry, and then oftentimes do some quantitative analysis to supplement that, with the overarching goal to figure out how diseases are transmitted between animals and why they're transmitted.
Interesting. Okay. So home base for you is Florida, at the University of Florida.
Correct.
Tell us how this initiative kicked off originally. How did it come to be?
Yeah. So Florida has more than 400 deer farms and preserves. So we're a strong deer farming state. And in 2012, nationwide, there was a really large outbreak of epizootic hemorrhagic disease, EHD. It's estimated that Florida deer farmers alone lost about $32 million worth of inventory, so of deer. And I think they wanted to take action. And so the way they did that is several deer farmers got together, they hired a lobbyist, and they went to the Florida legislature and asked them for help. And the way agriculture has received help in the past is through IFAS, the Institute for Food and Agricultural Sciences within the University of Florida. So we have many industry university partnerships, whether it be beef cattle or blueberries or strawberries. And so this was just a natural integration of deer farming and the University of Florida. And so we have received $2 million a year from the state legislature every year since 2016 to help deer farmers. So that money that we receive goes right back to help the deer farming industry.
Um, I agree that it does help the deer farm industry, but I think it has much broader impacts across the EHD space because, the disease doesn't discriminate whether there's a fence or not, or they're privately managed or publicly held. And so I guess from my perspective, I look at it and I say, what better opportunity for that public-private partnership and integrated university partnership to work on this really, really, it's a nasty disease, right? Like we're going to get into some of that, but there's, 34 million just white-tailed deer, let alone, other susceptible species that have issues with EHD. So I think it has broader impact. I suspect you see that as well. And I again, I think the work that goes on there has lasting impacts for specifically white-tailed deer across the country. Um, so and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a line item in the state budget for the university to have this funding, which is incredible, right? Like that means that everybody has agreed and is committed to this process of funding. um how do you go about setting up a lab like this? Like walk us through that original process. I know it was a while ago because you're probably one of the longest funded labs that I know of,
Yeah,
like this, but walk us through that process.
yeah. Thanks. It is. It has been a really exciting ride. So as a land grant university, we think of this sort of triangle, and the triangle is extension, teaching, and research. And so, really one of the tenets of that is doing a needs assessment of your stakeholders. So we went and asked deer farmers before we ever even set up anything, what is it that you need to know?
Hmm.
What is it that you need help with? I mean, we knew sort of, that EHD was this problem, but it became very clear very quickly that there were a lot of presumptions about what was killing deer and not a lot of diagnostics or science behind it. People weren't really testing their animals. Their animals would die and they would presume it was EHD. And so that was really the very first thing that we wanted to do is let's figure out exactly what it is that's killing deer, specifically in Florida. I keep saying in Florida because our funding has to stay in Florida, but you're absolutely right. The things that we have done have helped people not only around the country, but I get calls right now, especially all over Europe, because they are having such a big EHD and blue tongue problem that's really emerging there.
Hmm.
So the first thing we did is we set up this diagnostic workflow. I hired a wildlife extension veterinarian, and thank goodness he's still here today. That's Dr. Juan Campos. He is an amazing deer vet. And our diagnostic workflow works that we have a deer hotline. So our deer farmers call us when they have a dead animal. We send a dedicated necropsy crew out to that person's farm. They collect all the samples that they have. They look at the gross pathology. If Dr. Campos isn't there, he's on a video call with them looking at the animal while they're necropsying it. We take all of those tissues back to the lab and we run a diagnostic workflow that typically goes between 3 and 5 laboratories. We return a diagnosis of hemorrhagic disease or not within 48 hours of taking those samples. So we test for EHDV and blue tongue virus immediately. And one of the first things we found is that while there is a lot of EHDV and it is absolutely the #1 killer of farm deer in Florida, there were a lot of other things killing people's deer. And so that was like really low hanging fruit to help people sort of figure out some of the more easily solvable things that were killing their animals. And then really tackling the incredibly difficult process of keeping animals safe from EHDV, because I think, as everybody knows, it's not one thing that's going to help save deer, right? It's going to be this very integrated approach that we can talk about.
Yeah. I saw when we were out at the NADIFA conference, I'm sidebarring a little bit. I saw there was two young ladies with you. I'm assuming they work in the lab. Tell us how that, because you're working through the university system, are these potential PhD candidates? Like how does that work? How do you, like, outside of Dr. Campos, I suspect you have some student integration as well.
Yeah, yeah. So we are actually an academic appropriation. So a lot of the work we do involves students. Um, let's see if I can remember the statistic. We have 53 students. So these could be undergraduate and then 23 interns. And so the interns are almost always those necropsy technicians. And what I think is so cool about that is now like 75 people in Florida who know the, right? They know what it is, they know what it's about. And I think just from getting a greater understanding and not demonizing it, as a lot of people want to do, it's been a really great tool to help that sort of understanding about it. But then, just on a level of professional development, these interns go on to veterinary school or graduate school. We have some of the veterinarians graduated, they have gone on to SQUIDIS, the Southeastern Cooperative Disease Lab. So again, just sort of disseminating people that don't have quite have a more optimistic view or broad view of what deer farming is, which to me is really important.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like for me, I'm well outside of the university system, but when I see minds being developed around, and having the opportunity to experience something like the program that you have, it it's just a good feeling for me anyway, knowing that those people are developing skills all while becoming, professionally developed, and I suspect that experience really can drive their careers in such a productive way outside of things that we could ever even think of. And because there's so many, like I did not, like you mentioned Europe, right? I didn't know that Europe had EHD, right? I thought it was a North American disease, right? And so we get to learn these things, and like it's cool that people are calling you and asking you, because you probably have the largest body of work, so which is incredible. um okay, so the lab set up. I'm trying to create this mental timeline in my head, right? So the lab set up, you start doing the diagnostics, you start compiling data, right? And what do you find? What do you see? What pops out to you? Where's that aha moment?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think really not understanding what a large player that blue tongue virus has been.
Hmm.
It presents very, very similarly to epizootic hemorrhagic disease. And so I would say, of the when we see hemorrhagic disease kill an animal, I would say about maybe 1/3 of the time it's blue tongue virus and
Hmm.
2/3 of the time it's EHDV. And then there's this other factor that we discovered in this diagnostic pipeline. So we have two amazing virologists, Dr. Lednitsky and Dr. Subramaniam. One is in the College of Public Health, the other is in the College of Veterinary Medicine. So they come from this different background than sort of the general wildlife background we have. And so they use their amazing skills to grow, to culture viruses and then whole genome sequences. And finding is that this hemorrhagic syndrome, I'm going to call it, is really complicated. It's oftentimes a co-infection with EHDV, but then we discovered 9 additional orbiviruses, which are the same viruses as EHDV and blue tongue, that are often found in association with EHDV. And so this could be a much more complicated picture than we imagine, because sometimes animals are resistant to maybe EHDV, but what if they now have a co-infection with another orbivirus? Maybe that's what is the difference between an animal just having it and being asymptomatic, which we see all the time, and an animal getting sick and having hyperacute hemorrhagic disease and dying within, overnight, we often see. And so that's been really exciting to sort of think about, gosh, this may, what we think of as one virus may be this sort of constellation of viruses, and it would radically change, protect animals against it, but also treat animals that have it as well.
All right. We're going to start with basic. What is EHD?
Yeah. So epizootic hemorrhagic disease virus is a virus in the family orbiviruses. There's lots of different orbiviruses that cause sicknesses in lots of animals. So African horse sickness is an orbivirus. There's blue tongue virus is another orbivirus. And so this virus is vector-borne, meaning that it is carried by an arthropod, and the arthropod, the insect that carries it, is a midge. People call them no-see-ums. People can call them sand. They're in the genus Culicoides, and they're teensy tiny. It's much, much, much smaller than mosquitoes. Okay, and they're blood-sucking. And so you have an infected Culicoides, a deer, and it transmits that virus to the deer. That deer starts incubating that virus and becomes sick and oftentimes dies. And so in uninfected midges can infected deer and then transmit it. So once you have it on your farm, that's why we often see outbreaks rather than just single one-offs, because you get this cycle of virus being transmitted. The virus itself attacks cells all throughout the body, and so that's what causes this hemorrhagic disease. So really, people call it the Ebola of deer. The animal kind of liquefies from the inside out. It's a terrible, terrible disease. And so, it's endemic to the United States. It is worldwide. We see it all over the world. Same with blue tongue virus. We see it all over the world. And there's different serotypes. And by serotype, I mean it's a slightly different strain. And so in the United States, we have 3 strains. We have EHDV1, EHDV2, and EHDV6. EHDV2 is the most common, followed by EHDV6. And then at least in Florida, maybe every 3 years or so, we get an uptick in EHDV1. And each one of those, when we talk about vaccines, each one of those requires a different vaccine target to keep your safe from that particular serotype.
Okay. So now that we know what EHD is, I want to hop back to the lab. So you start compiling this data. I asked you about the aha moment, and what do you do with the information? Like, how does, like, you compile it, but like, do you distribute it? How do people that manage deer, whether that be public or privately, like, what do they do with that data?
Yeah. So as soon as we had a handle on what was really impacting animals, and that the number one cause of death was EHDV, even with all these other circulating viruses, still EHDV is, if we could get a vaccine for that, we knew that we could really decrease mortality in deer. And we toyed around with manufacturing vaccine, but we sort of looked across the vaccine landscape. And at the time, we realized that there were vaccines, people developing vaccines. There was already a vaccine on the market, the Newport vaccine. And so we took a step back. We didn't really want to invest money to compete with other people, especially companies, But what we decided we would do is provide information to any of those companies so that they could develop vaccines. And we also tested ones that were on the market to make sure that they were efficacious. The last thing I like seeing is bunk products being peddled on the market that don't work for deer farmers. And so we worked with Kansas State University. They had one that was coming up. We started working with MedGene. They had one that was coming up. And what we would do is we would whole genome sequence all of the EHDVs that we got. So whether it was EHDV2 or EHDV6, in order to make a real vaccine, you want the virus that's circulating in your population and the vaccine that's being produced to match exactly. And you can't know that unless you have the genome sequence. And so we gave that information to anyone who would take it. It's publicly available. MedGene is the one that developed the license first, and so we have continued to work with them. Every year we feed them EHDV2 and EHDV6 sequences to make sure that the product that they're producing still looks like what's circulating in deer. So that was sort of the route we took. We did efficacy studies of all of these vaccines, and the MedGene vaccine reduced mortality significantly in our Florida deer farms. They have data that shows that, but we also have independent data from theirs that also shows that as well. I would say sort of the next step after that we needed to develop, we saw some farms where the vaccine wasn't working. And so we really wanted to dig in why that was. And in most cases, it turns out that our deer farmers were not using the vaccine as the manufacturer told them to, right? So for, a lot of people just wanted to give one dose of the vaccine. And at least the first time around, you have to give them 2 doses. The animals won't mount an immune response. So that was just kind of simple education, right? Like, how do we really, so we have infographics and seminars that we do where we really, if you're going to vaccinate your animals, do it right. If you're going to spend that money, make sure that you're doing it properly.
Gotcha. You touched on the seminars. I've excuse me. I apologize if you're listening. My throat's killing me today, and I keep hacking. I'm trying to keep it off air, but um, I've sat in quite a few of your seminars, and it's heavy on knowledge, right? And you do a great job at I'll call it dumbing it down for people like me, so I can understand because there's a lot of technicalities and there's these unknowns. People hear genomic sequencing and viruses, and they're just like, okay, I'm just a farmer, right? Like, tell me what to do. But um that's been kind of a core component of the Cherry Initiative, hasn't it? It's been that education side of things where, it's all great to do research, but if you're not able to share that with people, what good is it, right? It's sitting in some bin silo somewhere that nobody's going to read. So can you talk about um, the education side a little bit of what you do?
Yeah. Thanks for teeing that up because you're absolutely right. And for me, it's the absolute most fun part of my job. So, yeah. So to sort of continue with the story of how land grant university systems work, right? We do this needs assessment. We figure out the research, the real science that we need to do to help that need. But then the final leg of that is the extension work. Once we have a solution, translating that science-based solution so that deer farmers or anyone who works in extension can use that. So our stakeholders, in this case, deer farmers, can use that information. So yeah, so we hold seminars, we have information that we distribute. Some of the most recent that we've had are, we always love doing a fawning demonstration or workshop. So, and that's Dr. Juan Campos. So and what are the best practices for really making your fawns robust and getting them through the suckling process, right? We've been toying with the idea with doing a semen quality seminar. We've had some deer farmers that have had problems with keeping semen viable, or really, being able to see what is really good semen before they put it into their animals. So really, again, listening to our deer farmers, and then really trying to figure out what we can do to answer the questions that they have.
Yeah, I love that. I'm curious because this year appeared, at least from my information sources, to be publicly one of the worst years for EHD and probably blue tongue across the country, at least in North America. Um,
Yeah.
just my sphere of people that I engage with regularly, like it was just like mass casualties everywhere. And we saw that within the wildlife community as well. Are you starting to see an uptick in inquiries to you outside of Europe, right? Where wildlife agencies are reaching out and saying, "Hey, like we have this issue. Like it's our responsibility to manage these herds. What are some insights that you can provide to us? Are you seeing that? Did you see that this past year?"
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's been, yeah, devastating. So the reindeer community has
Mm,
been very interested. They've been really impacted, and in past they haven't, right? They're in the northern part of the 48 states, at least in the continental US. There's a lot in Canada. Cattle there, it didn't kill the animals outright, but it caused a ton of infections. And so, these animals, their cattle would get really high fevers at the late stages of their pregnancy, and so they were aborting. Of course, they've had, they've had EHDV and blue tongue like crazy. Um, in terms of agencies, beginning about, I guess, 3 years ago, the USDA is really starting to rethink how they deal with blue tongue virus. It's a reportable disease for them, particularly it can impact cattle out of the US. Um, I reached out to Cherry, really wanting to better understand, to a nationwide picture of. So we've been in discussions with them, gosh, probably for 3 years now, about, I don't want to say deregulate, because there'll always be some regulations. Some of that is not USDA, some of that is exporters, but really thinking about it as a pathogen that quite so many regulatory restrictions on it, and really de-escalate some of those restrictions.
um, there's lots more that I want to cover, but I'd like to do it kind of methodically and um, for future shows. And so, give us give us a high level view of what Sherry has going on today that you guys are working on.
Yeah, sure. So I think on the vaccination front, we have a good handle on how we move forward with future vaccines, and sort of what are the future vaccines we want to do. And again, we are not going to get into vaccine production, but really waiting for other manufacturers like MedGene, like K-State to come online. So we've been feeding them other viruses of importance. So things like deer pox virus, which I think certainly in Florida, but we're also starting to see nationwide, is something that impacts deer more than people acknowledge. And when I say acknowledge, not that they're hiding it, but it manifests in a very different way than EHDV. So that's one thing that we're really investigating. With the HDV too, we also know that vaccination alone is not going to completely protect your farm. It is a very complicated disease. It happens during fawning season, and you can't vaccinate baby fawns, right? And that's just really hard. And so how do we keep those really vulnerable animals in our farm safe? And that's going to be midge management, right? Pest management. And we have an absolutely fabulous entomologist who's part of the Cervidae Health Research Initiative, Cherry. And that's Dr. Nathan Burkett Cadena. He comes from the Florida Medical Entomology Lab. He is a world-renowned entomologist who happens to love studying midges. And so he's been working with his postdoc, Dr. Kristen Sloyer, and a host of other graduate students that have just done excellent work to really think about midge ecology, right? We just don't know anything about them. There are 52 midge species in Florida. There's 150 of them in the United States. We needed to even figure out like which ones are carrying EHDV, right? So once we did that, understanding their behavior, like these midges have different behavior, each species. And I much of the story away because this is a great story, but it turns out like they're on farms like maybe 4 hours a day. The rest of the time they're hanging out up in trees. And so when we mist or fog for midges, we have to sort of rethink about how we do it and when we do it, so we're not just wasting time and money, right? So that's something that we're actively working on right now, and I think some really cool ideas about farmers' money and really populations. So that's one really exciting avenue that I'm really looking forward to move forward. So we're still in that research phase right now, right? We don't have any solid advice to give farmers, but I bet you we will next year at NADIFA. I bet you we'll have some good stuff to tell farmers. We have also, our farmers really want to know more about nutrition. And, rather than just stuffing our deer full of protein, which can be super expensive, and half the time they're just pooping it out, right? So what can we do to really maximize growth and save our deer farmers some money? That's really what our farmers wanted to know. And so again, we have a great nutritionist. He's a small ungulate nutritionist. His name is Dr. Diwakar Vyas here at the University of Florida in the Animal Sciences Department. And he is a huge advocate for forages, like putting natural forages back into our deer, not just having a pelleted diet. And so we're in the science phase right now. We're really looking at we're feeding deer different diets. We're measuring what goes into the deer. We're measuring what comes out of the deer and seeing how much protein is just pooped out, right? As opposed to being incorporated into making big deer and making big antlers. And so that one's going to be 2 or 3 years down the line. And I should just say that all of the research that we do is in collaboration with our deer farmers. All of our research happens on deer farms. And I just cannot thank our deer farmers enough for trusting us to go onto their farms and trusting us to do this research. Our partnership means everything to me and to all of our scientists and students.
Well, I love that. I love the investment of time and energy in collaboration with the people that keep these animals alive, want to keep them alive, right? And see them do well. Thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a pleasure, and I'd like to just extend the offer as I've done before, just to have some regular updates, because I think this work's important, and I want to continue to shine a light on it for everyone to be able to take advantage of it. There's no point in doing the work and then, stuff it in a computer silo somewhere where people can't take advantage of that. So first of all, thank you for that. And we look forward to having you back on.
Likewise, I look forward to being back.
Thank you so much. And with that, stay tuned for another episode of the Deer Wizard podcast.